Yes, I am live. So it looks like we are streaming breaking news. Tropical Depression 9 has formed in the Caribbean Sea, and this could be an issue with us as we move into the weekend, because this will pose a threat to the Texas and Louisiana coastline. More so Louisiana, based on some of the data that I've seen this morning, but the current stats on it, I'll put that up on the screen for you. Again, 35-mile-per-hour winds, so this is a minimal tropical depression, and movement is off to the northwest at 13 miles per hour. So it's a quick mover. It will probably be moving over the Yucatan Peninsula over the next 48 or so hours. But what it does after that, that is what's going to be important here. So again, the center of circulation, it is to the south of Cuba right now. A couple of showers and thunderstorms here and there. But once again, it's a very lopsided storm at this point. They tend to be lopsided, especially when they're encountering the type of shear this storm is encountering. But once again, as it moves off to the north and to the east, I expect it to intensify, and unfortunately, I expect this to intensify quickly. So here's the track we are looking at: 65-mile-per-hour winds by 7 o'clock Wednesday. Now, as we take it into the Gulf of Mexico, that's when things are going to become, a little stronger. This is when I do expect this to strengthen into a hurricane, with potentially almost a major hurricane, a strong Category 2. It takes about 111, 112-mile-per-hour winds for this to be a Category 3. This is just going to be rated just under that according to the forecast track, which obviously it will probably change. But as we move into the upcoming weekend, this is going to move up into sections of Louisiana. Now, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here just to show you a better idea of the track. Again, we're streaming this on our website, KETK and Fox51.com here. But once again, the projected path of what is now Tropical Depression number 9 will take this into sections of central Louisiana. That's where the bulk of the models are at this point. And this is projected to make landfall as a strong Category 2 storm at some point between Sunday and Monday. So unfortunately, this is looking like more so of a late Sunday night storm into an early Saturday morning storm. But the good news is most of Texas probably not going to be impacted from this storm system. At least that's what the data indicates as of right now. The models have been extremely consistent, even though this is on Sunday or Monday, so still a couple of days out here. The models have been really consistent with bringing this into sections of Louisiana. So certainly some good news for us here in Texas, not so good news for Louisiana here. But we'll go ahead and show you some of those spaghetti plots, and then I'm going to share this Facebook Live and this digital stream we've got going to some of our area. And once again, the mouse is on the screen. That's pretty cool. Once again, most of the models are taking this into Louisiana. And again, this is just a spread of a lot of the models we use to determine where exactly this storm is going to go. And notice, none of them take it into Texas, or along the Texas Gulf Coast, I should say, for landfall. There's going to be an area of high pressure over sections of Georgia and the Carolinas. That should steer it away from us, which is certainly good news. We could do without the heavy rain that we've already seen here in August. We could do without it. But again, this could push up into sections of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama here, making it a much, not really a needed rainmaker, I should say, for the Deep South. I mean, you noticed all that flooding in Tennessee. Unfortunately, this is just going to kind of exacerbate the situation as we move a little forward in time, unfortunately for them. But again, the main threat would be that coastal flooding along the Louisiana Gulf Coast, and also the threat of some isolated tornadoes and some flash flooding for Mississippi and Alabama. That's what I anticipate with this storm right here. So definitely something that we will need to monitor. Some of the cone right now is in East Texas. We'll go ahead and pop back to that. Here's the projected path of the storm. Now, one of the things to understand about this forecast cone is the center can go anywhere in this cone. At least, within, if you've ever taken a stats class, you know about the standard deviation, within 2 standard deviations, which is about the average path of this storm, the center can go along. So it's likely to stay within in this cone even this far out. Now, by 7 o'clock Friday, it's going to cross the western tip of Cuba, and unfortunately, it will move into the Gulf of Mexico, and the conditions are favorable for this to really intensify as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. Look at that difference between Saturday and Sunday. That's a 12-hour difference there. Notice the time, 7 o'clock Saturday and 7 o'clock Saturday evening, I should say, and 7 o'clock Sunday morning. That's an intensification about 20 miles per hour of wind speed within the course of 12 hours. So conditions obviously are very favorable for development. And unfortunately, I do expect this to intensify, perhaps even rapidly, as it moves into sections of the Gulf of Mexico. So definitely something we're going to have to keep a close eye on, and something that I want everybody to be weather aware for. We're going to go ahead and share this over to some of our Facebook pages just so we can get more viewers engaged here. But once again, tracking Tropical Depression number 9. It formed at the 10 o'clock advisory. The National Hurricane Center put out a bulletin before then that they were going to issue this advisory starting at about 10 o'clock here. But once again, Tropical Depression 9 has officially formed in the Atlantic Basin. This was anticipated, and we will continue to have to monitor this as we move into the next couple of hours. I'm going to share this over to my page, meteorologist Carson Vickroy, so you can ask your questions, and we will also move this over to some of our other Facebook pages as well, just so you guys can have some of your questions answered. But once again, this is no longer a question of if the storm will form. It's more of a question on where exactly the storm is going to head, because this is officially our 9th storm in the Atlantic Basin. It will be considered Tropical Storm Ida or Ida. I'm not sure on the pronunciation, but again, it is the I storm, which historically, I was reading something this morning, historically seems to be retired, and this does have the potential of being that strong of a storm to where it does end up being retired because of how strong it's going to be once it makes landfall. But once again, that's the projected path of the storm. As you can see here, we are going to, just got a text from Chief Meteorologist Marcus Bagwell, and he's wondering if he can jump on at 11:30, but yes, he'll be able to jump on at 11:30. Back to topic. I'm going to go ahead and give you the current stats on Tropical Depression 9 here, and here we go. Again, it's a minimal tropical depression. The hurricane centers, they're going to fly a C-130 out there out of Biloxi, and what they're going to do is they're going to gather data from multiple points in the storm, just to get an idea of how strong this is. Now, if it were to strengthen anymore, it would be Tropical Storm Ida as it moved further and further off to the north and to the west. So we will definitely have to keep a close eye on that. But again, a lopsided storm. It's got a closed low. That's why the National Hurricane Center decided to designate this as a tropical depression. It's really just a cluster of organized thunderstorms over the Atlantic Basin that is showing those tropical characteristics, moving counterclockwise around a closed point. So it's moving counterclockwise around this D right here. And unfortunately, this is moving into an environment that's very favorable for strengthening. We'll show you the projected path, and then we'll show you just the spread of some models that we have this morning, and these are updated as of this morning, and this just kind of encompasses the different directions it could go. So anywhere within the cone, anywhere within the yellow, this storm could go, and once again, it's going to move up into the Gulf of Mexico and eventually make landfall, likely in Louisiana, just based on the data I've seen this morning. Now again, could that change to southeast Texas? Definitely. If we had a southeast Texas landfall, we would definitely have more impacts here in East Texas, but that's currently not in the forecast right now. Right now, I do have rain in the forecast for next week, but it's going to pale into comparison compared to what we have in Louisiana just off to the east. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to zoom in on the path of this storm, and then we'll kind of run through some of the dynamics, what's working for the storm, what's working against the storm. We'll go a little more in depth with that. But I just want to show you our counties here in East Texas. Parts of our eastern counties are within that yellow, meaning we are within the cone of uncertainty. So we would be dealing with a big problem if the forecast track shifted from the center and over to the western side of the yellow right here, and that would include a lot of our eastern counties. That is a possibility that we will need to account for as we move into next week. But if this does shift a little further off to the east, we're probably not going to have much in the way of impacts at all. But I know a lot of people here in East Texas, know people in Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Louisiana, sections of New Orleans, Grand Isle, some of the major cities in central and eastern Louisiana. This is a red flag for you guys because this does look like a pretty intense storm. And you can see even about 50 miles inland there, it's going to have winds of about 80 miles per hour as it tracks up into Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas. Now let me go ahead and show you some of the model spreads, and then we'll show you again some of the dynamics working for and against the storm. But the model plots with this storm are very, very consistent, which, I mean, as a forecaster, you like to see that because you know or have a very good idea of knowing where exactly this storm is heading. And most of the models as of right now are taking this into New Orleans. There's more models to the west, or to the east of the storm rather, than there was to the west of the storm. So a very tight cluster over central Louisiana. If you know your Louisiana cities, I would say that would be near Pecan Island, Louisiana, Houma as well, to the east of Cameron Beach, Grand Isle to the south of New Orleans eventually into Baton Rouge. It should move to the west of Hammond according to this forecast track right here. But again, that's just if you know. The broad consensus is that this will move through central and southeastern Louisiana, eventually into sections of Mississippi and other sections of the deep south, which would mean Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama would see the greatest impacts from this storm. Now, I'm going to show you one forecast model that we really like to use in a situation like this. This is the global forecast model. It was very accurate last year. I mean, it passed with flying colors with predicting some of these similar storms that actually did move over the Louisiana region. So this does have a pretty good handle on what's happening, and this one is in agreement with all the various model runs that I just showed. But again, global forecast model, we not only use this for hurricanes, we also use this for middle to long range forecasting here in East Texas as well. So there we go. That is the center of circulation. This is Monday at 3 o'clock. So yesterday we showed you this, and it was a little slower. It was still in the Gulf of Mexico by that point, but it's a little quicker now. It looks like more so of a Sunday night into Monday morning landfall. And once again, you know, you look to the west of this storm, we got to talk about East Texas here. We're just dealing with a few clouds here and there. We're going to be dealing with a northerly wind, which should help to cool us off. And we won't be seeing a lot in the way of rain. Now, I do still expect rain here in East Texas given this model run, but rain chances are going to be limited, and it's not going to be anything compared with what happens over Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and other sections of the deep south here. But once again, this is just one model run. This track could shift from west to east, but one thing I do know is unfortunately this is going to be running into some very warm ocean water. Now, a few of the ingredients you need for a hurricane to maintain its strength is one, some very warm ocean water, not a lot of dry air, and also not a lot of wind shear. And I don't have dry air in my forecast. You feel how humid it is right now in East Texas? That's the type of air that this storm has to work with, and even greater humidity values over water as well. And then the wind shear, we're not seeing a lot of wind shear across the Gulf of Mexico, which means, I mean, this is just acting like jet fuel for this storm to strengthen. Now, is a major hurricane in the forecast cone right now? The answer to that is no. Now, could we see a major hurricane? Definitely, because this is pretty much bath water for me. You can see middle to upper 80s for those water temperatures right there. It's just kind of gross. It's almost like a jacuzzi for this storm to really get its wits together and to really intensify as it pushes over the Gulf of Mexico prior to it making landfall again Sunday night into Monday morning. We're going to go ahead. I'm going to try and see if I can find the infrared satellite version of the storm here, because I do want to show you just the structure and a good loop on the storm. And once again, this is tropical depression number 9, so that needs to be changed. And again, this is just fresh information, so I'm having to change the graphics on a go. But there you go right there. That's the storm, and we'll go ahead and loop it for you here in just a little bit. But again, the colder clouds you see on the screen, that just means the clouds are real high up. They're vertically stacked, and that just means that the storm is trying to intensify just a little bit. We'll loop this for you, and you can see just that blow up of convection right there. Pretty strong, especially on the east side of the storm. Now, when we see a lopsided system like this, it usually means on the west side of the storm, you're seeing a lot of wind shear. Now, one thing to notice right here, and this does confirm my thought about the wind shear, notice you got clouds moving off to the north, and then you do have clouds moving off to the west. That means the winds are moving in different directions as you go up in height. That is an indication of wind shear. That is not healthy for tropical storms to develop here. So that's some good news right now. Now, will it move into a more favorable environment with less wind shear? The answer to that is yes, but this is something that we will keep close tabs on. And as you can see, most of the convection is moving over sections of Cuba. Again, where you're seeing those cold cloud tops right here, that just means as you go up in atmosphere, you tend to get a little colder. And when you're starting to see those clouds show up on your infrared product or your satellite product, that is when you are seeing at least that chance that things are beginning to wrap itself together and really intensify with a tropical depression like this. So definitely signs that this storm will get its act together, but it is still encountering some of that wind shear, as I just pointed out. So it might take a while for this storm to really intensify. Going forward, this is again as of the 10 o'clock advisory, we are seeing 35-mile-per-hour winds, and we are seeing it move off to the northwest at 13 miles per hour. Now, granted, with the strength of the storm, that's not super important right now, but it is noteworthy. The pressure's at 1,005 millibars and 35-mile-per-hour winds, and you think about that, that's pretty much a regular storm in East Texas. Most of those storms do end up having 35, 40-mile-per-hour winds, but the wind speed's not important right now. It's the fact that we have a storm that is going to move over favorable conditions. All of this water you see on the screen right here, that's all jet fuel for this storm to really get going this morning. And as it moves up into the Gulf of Mexico, we're really going to start to see this pick up in intensity, and unfortunately, it should strengthen significantly before it ultimately makes landfall somewhere along the Gulf Coast. But this is what we have right now, and we're going to look at the projected path one more time, and then we will get ready for East Texas Live here. But once again, a projected path of this storm, this shouldn't be real alarming for us here in East Texas, but it is something that it's worth watching over the weekend. Make sure you're tuning in to KETK's in the mornings, KETK in the afternoons with Chief Meteorologist Marcus Bagwell. We will continue to keep you updated with this storm. There's no doubt about that, but I'm not super concerned with the East Texas impacts right now. Now, if this were to shift a little further off to the west, we would definitely have to be more concerned here in East Texas, but that is currently not in the forecast. But as this moves along into the Gulf of Mexico, things will really start to get going. I'll show you why here in just a minute, but this could become a hurricane by Saturday at 7 o'clock. Now, as we move into Sunday morning, that is when it's going to move into the most favorable environment prior to making landfall, likely at some point Sunday night or Monday morning. At 7 o'clock Monday morning, it will be inland there, and we'll go ahead. I don't have the camera angle set on this very well, but you know, you see this landfall right here, somewhere over central Louisiana. We'll pan in just to give you an idea, just in case you've got family in Louisiana. But once again, near the Lafayette area, Lake Charles, unfortunately, they got hit by a couple of hurricanes last year. Houma, Louisiana, Slidell could see a pretty good push and impact from it. And then New Orleans is also going to be in the path of this storm, so we will definitely have to keep close tabs on this. We zoom out just a little bit, and you notice right here in the left of the cone, in the western section of the cone where that mouse is, it does include East Texas. Now, am I saying that the center of the storm is going to go completely to the west of the initial line right here? No. Is it possible? Yes, because it is in the forecast cone, but most of the data right now is favoring a central or eastern Louisiana landfall. But once again, here in the forecast cone does include sections of East Texas, and therefore I do have rain in my forecast because of where this storm might end up heading. Now, we'll talk about some of the forecast models right here. And once again, they're going into Louisiana for the most part, central, eastern Louisiana. Even a couple models have shifted all the way out to the east for Mississippi and eastern Mississippi, but eventually this will start to curve away, bringing some impacts to places like the Mississippi and the Ohio River Valley, a little further off to the north for sections of Tennessee and Kentucky. So we will definitely have to keep a close eye on that. Another model run we like to use is the global model. And here's what it says. I mean, it's right on par with the spaghetti plots I just showed you. We call them spaghetti because they look like spaghetti, but they're certainly not spaghetti or anything like that. They're just individual model runs that we like to use to determine the path of this storm. And the global forecast model, one of our more reliable models, is taking this right up the gut into Louisiana, across sections of Mississippi and Alabama here. But again, the main threat to the east side of this storm will be heavy rain, perhaps even some tornadoes in the northeast quadrant of this storm. So that would mean sections of extreme eastern Louisiana, northern Mississippi maybe, and sections of Alabama. That's where I would be most concerned with the potential of some isolated tornadoes. That does not include East Texas. We are on the more favorable part of the low for better weather, less rain chances, less severe weather, but still probably a lot of humidity because it's East Texas. Water temperatures. Now, this is very important. There's a reason why these tropical systems occur only over water most of the time. It's because, well, the water is their fuel source, and anytime you've got Gulf of Mexico waters in August and September, one of the reasons why the peak of hurricane season is September 10th, that is when we tend to see the ocean waters, you know, at their warmest, and that's the fuel source. Anytime you've got a tropical system, they feed off of this type of stuff. And look at this, you know, I've queried this out for you. Middle to upper 80s for those water temperatures right now. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of, in my opinion, I mean, I like to swim in upper 70, maybe even lower 80-degree water if it's cool, if it's a cool enough of a day. I mean, that's just refreshing. This is not refreshing. This is pretty much like bath water for us, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, it's got all that, and that's just adding more fuel to the fire for this storm to really get its act together. And I showed you the wind shear earlier. We're not seeing a lot of that, unfortunately, in the Gulf of Mexico, which could help rip this thing apart. It's just not in the forecast currently. So tracking the tropics, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. We can't really pinpoint exactly what the impacts are going to be to East Texas. We've got the storm track now, so this graphic will be updated. We do have the storm track, and what I just showed you, since those water temperatures are really warm, with what could be tropical storm Ida or Ida, I'm not sure what pronunciation, I'm going to have to touch up on that here in just a little bit. But I do expect this to form either later today or early tomorrow. It just has to pick up its strength just a little bit to 40-mile-per-hour storm as opposed to a 35-mile-per-hour storm, and then we will have our tropical storms. But again, the global model, the European model, which historically the European model is the best model to use, both taking it into Louisiana, which would mean relatively minimal impacts for the Texas Gulf Coast, but serious impacts for the Louisiana Gulf Coast. And, you know, there's definitely a lot of possibilities with this storm here, so we will be watching out for that very carefully. Let me go ahead and show you guys some of the hurricane names real quick. So this would be Tropical Storm Ida if it were to continue to get its act together. Now, we've already had, you know, the A, B, C, D, E, and we've even had the F and the G and the H storm as well. So this graphic is not updated yet, but this would be the I storm. But if you remember correctly, unfortunately, the I storm is the one that ends up getting retired at the end of the season, meaning it was a significant enough storm that we don't want people getting confused, you know, from one year to another. You know, hurricane names like Katrina, Ike, Irene, let's see here, Ivan, Igor have all been retired. And unfortunately, you know, this one could be one of those storms that's significant enough that we do see, you know, a retirement. I mean, that's not set in stone by any stretch of the imagination, but it is something that, you know, it's just kind of noteworthy and interesting. But again, there's the storm south of Cuba over Jamaica. That's where the most of the rain, convection, and thunderstorm activity is. Again, we're looking at cloud tops right here. The colder they are, the stronger the storm is there at the center. And this will continue to move up into sections of the northern Caribbean, eventually moving into the Gulf of Mexico by tomorrow night and Saturday morning. So definitely watching out for that. And once again, very lopsided storm. And you can just kind of see this is encountering some wind shear on the western side of the center of circulation. And fortunately, that should prevent it from rapidly intensifying, at least over the next 24 hours. 35-mile-per-hour winds at the center of circulation, and this does put it on a track into the Gulf of Mexico. So we'll show you the projected path one more time. We've got about 20 minutes left until East Texas Live is on, so please tune in for that if you're listening on our digital streams or any of our Facebook pages. We'll have a full update at the top of the hour just to give you an idea of what exactly is going on. But it will be very similar to some of the information you'll see, and you'll also get your East Texas 7-day forecast as well. But back to this, a strong tropical storm by 7 o'clock tomorrow evening, and then it moves up into the Gulf of Mexico, and we still have some disagreements in some of the forecast models. Most of the models take it into Louisiana and Mississippi, but where exactly the center of the storm is going to track is going to be absolutely crucial to the impacts we see here in East Texas. But we move this along just a little bit, and it moves into Louisiana and sections of Mississippi and Alabama as well. But again, my main concern right now is if we do have, you know, a significant shift in some of the forecast models. If this does end up moving a little further off to the west, then yeah, we do have to be concerned here in East Texas for some pretty strong winds, perhaps up to strong tropical storm force or hurricane force even. But if this does end up moving off to the east, it's a little concern to us, but a major concern to sections of Louisiana, Mississippi, and West Alabama, where they could have a severe weather outbreak on their hands. But again, regardless, the main impacts looks right up the gut of the Mississippi River, where we could see some, you know, again, some intense winds, some flash flooding, some isolated tornadoes. But again, it's one of those things that, you know, we are near the peak of hurricane season. Hurricane season's about September 10th. And, you know, we're just going to have to deal with this, unfortunately, over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks even. And even in October, we'll have to deal with the potential at some hurricanes as well. The Atlantic hurricane season does not come to an end until November 30th. So we're going to log off of our digital stream right now, but I will have a full update on Tropical Depression 9 here on East Texas Live. You can find that at 11 o'clock. You can watch it on cable. You can also stream us live on the app, which a lot of you are doing right now. You can also stream us on our website, ketk.com. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll continue to monitor this, so stay tuned for updates.